from an extremely dangerous and stormy Washington, D.C. It's been, somewhere north of 95 degrees for the last 2 weeks. Hot. But that's what it is in D.C. in July and August. Hot. And I want to thank Alina Seven for letting me host for her tonight. She's getting her kids all tucked away in college as schools start back again. So I'm Michael Brown, former vice chair of the Washington, D.C. City Council, and I look forward to talking to you about guns and the impact of white supremacist terrorist organizations on our communities. So welcome to The Hustle on WLVS. What's wrong, though, is when certain types of weapons are mowing down innocent people, when they're using weapons of war and using that to either make a point because they may not like your skin color, may not like what God you worship, may not like your sexual orientation, may not like a variety of things, and they just feel that's the way they want to make their point, is to gun you down. That's one of the reasons. Maybe you're mentally stable. Maybe you have a lot of hate in your heart. There could be something. Maybe it was easy access to a gun. Maybe you got fired. Maybe your girlfriend or boyfriend broke up with you. Maybe you're just frustrated with life. Either way, it doesn't seem rational that you should be able to go buy an AR-15 or an AK-47, walk into a church, into a school, into a mall, into a bar or restaurant, and squeeze the trigger. So as we have this debate, and this debate is happening all over the country, frankly, all over the world, we have to now understand kind of what this debate will be all about. Let me give you an example, New Zealand, and talk a little bit about political will. In New Zealand, during that terrible massacre, you know what they did? Within 2 weeks, they had outlawed assault weapons. Had the political will. And now I'm not suggesting the NRA did not go to New Zealand, did not try to stop that ban. But the political will of the leaders in New Zealand said, you know what? No lobbying group is going to have that kind of pull where we're not going to have the courage to stand up for the safety of our people. And then you'll hear excuses like, oh, it's mentally ill, people are crazy. And I'm not suggesting that's not true or can't be true in some cases. Or you'll hear about, oh, people are playing too many video games, or it's Hollywood. All these are the kind of GOP, Republican Party talking points, NRA talking points about how to deflect and distract from the main issue, and that's guns. So then as you're starting to figure out and you're watching the news and you're reading whatever you're reading or listening to people like me about kind of where to lean or what to do in the Second Amendment, and all those are fair conversations. I'm not suggesting this is easy, but I think one of the questions clearly you have to ask yourself is, wow, do people need weapons of war in the streets of America? Now, soldiers need them, clearly. Certainly possible law enforcement need them. And no one's trying to take a gun out of your hand. If you want to have your 9 or your shotgun to protect your family, no one's saying you can't do that. The question is, do you need a gun with a high-capacity magazine that enables someone to mow people down? Do you need that kind of weapon? It's certainly not for hunting. Certainly not even protecting your family, because that's not what's being used. So those are the questions to ask. Now, recently, I know this country, ever since, certainly for several decades, but certainly 9/11, really turned our attention towards certain kinds of people relative to what the definition of terror is, or terrorism. Well, that definition is now changing. And frankly, it's been around for quite some time, even since Timothy McVeigh in the early 90s. So there have been white supremacist groups that are terrorist groups. Let's be clear about that. They're terrorists. Because when they walk into a mall or a church or a school and mow people down, that's a terrorist act. So the question then is, why aren't white supremacist terror groups getting the same kind of attention as, I guess, what folks would call traditional terrorists? Well, I think we all know the answer to that question. It depends on, frankly, who is the leader. And it all starts at the top. And number 45 has condoned this type of behavior online in Charlottesville, back in the Central Park 5 case. There's been a pattern of 45 treat people of color a certain way. Go back to your own country. You come from an S-hole country. You're not as good. So from my standpoint, you know, you'll hear me say it all the time. You've heard me say it on The Hustle, on Alina Seven's show. You probably heard me say it on Hannity's show on Fox. You've heard me say it on O'Reilly's show before it got canceled. You've heard me say it on Roland Martin's show. And I've said it countless other times. And what I've said was, elections have consequences. And those consequences are when you either choose to not go vote, stay at home, you think you're making a point that, you know what, my vote didn't matter, I didn't like any of these candidates, I'm staying at home. All you're doing is voting for the other person. So if you stayed home in the 2016 race because you didn't like Secretary Clinton, for whatever reason, you didn't like her. Maybe she beat Bernie Sanders. Maybe you just didn't like a woman being president. Whatever your reason that you didn't like her. I'm not saying it wasn't a legitimate reason. Whatever your reason. If you stayed at home, that was a vote for 45. So the point you may have been making was really a vote for him. So let's tie that back into gun laws and gun safety. So when you have certain people who are at the top of our government, whether it's obviously the president or members of Congress, United States Senate, cabinet, folks that run the different agencies, those are the folks that are going to move certain legislation forward or keep certain legislation from being passed. So when clearly the GOP has an affection and some kind of love relationship with the NRA and how they treat young white males that have guns different than young people of color that have weapons, you know that starts at the top. So what 45 has said is, look, in Charlottesville, whether you're a Nazi, whether you're a white supremacist, and you're walking down the street, you know what? Good people on both sides. When you're a person of color and you voice your criticism against 45, you know what? Go back to your S-hole country. There's a way that how he is dividing our country, and guns is one of those dividing issues. A woman's right to choose is one of those issues. Where you're from is one of those issues. That never used to be an issue before. You're an American, you're an American. It shouldn't matter where you came from. This is a country of immigrants. Yes, black folks were some of the first folks here. As a matter of fact, as you know, we're celebrating the anniversary of 400 years of black folks that were taken from Africa and are here in the United States. We were here before all those other immigrant groups, before the Italians, before the Irish. We've been here from the beginning and frankly built this country. So we have every right and every claim to talk about America just like anybody else. So as we talk about the gun debate, and you'll have Republicans that clearly are going to support whatever the National Rifle Association says, the NRA. And then you have Democrats on the other side saying, let's just have common sense gun laws, background checks. And do you need to have those kind of high capacity weapons on the street? Because not only are they mowing down innocent folks in churches, restaurants, bars, malls, synagogues, mosques, but they're also getting mowed down in our streets and our urban communities. That can't be good either. So we have a lot of different options. So some of them are, some of the folks are talking about now, some bipartisan conversation about putting up a different little stronger background check. So before you can buy a gun, there's a little waiting period, do check on you. You have any violence issue, domestic violence, have you made any threats online? As you've noticed, the governments are starting to pick people up now because they're looking at their online chat. And folks now, their defense is, oh, I was just joking. Well, it's not a joke. And if you make those threats online, it's illegal. And if law enforcement's serious about it, you're going to get arrested. And you're going to have to deal with the consequences of that. So, was it that important to you? Now, as 45 has empowered these young white supremacist terror organizations, they feel, hey, I can go get a gun legally, and if I don't like the color of somebody's skin, or I don't like the God they worship, or I don't like where they're from, I think I have the right to go walk in somewhere and pull a trigger. And, that can't be right. So, while we have a background check, maybe it won't stop every crime. Maybe it won't. Maybe it won't stop these massacres. But if it stops one, isn't that enough? And then obviously if it stops two, great. 3, 4, who knows how many. But until the GOP-controlled Senate has the courage and Senator McConnell steps aside and let the American people, 94%, and this is a Fox News poll, 94% of the American people would love to have stronger background checks. No one's talking about taking folks' guns. No one's talking about repealing the Second Amendment. All those kind of fear tactics that distract and deflect from the real issues. So as you're starting to think about where you are, whether you're in D.C., Maryland, Virginia, wherever you are, and you're starting to figure out how you're going to vote, who you're going to vote for, those are some of the questions you want to ask. Is where do they stand on sensible gun control? So we're going to take a little break, and after the break, we'll get a little in-depth. As you know, Alina Seven likes for me to talk about 2020 and the elections coming up. We're going to still touch on the gun issue because clearly the mass shootings of a couple weeks ago is at the top of everyone's think chart. So we're going to talk a little more about that, 2020 elections. I'll still be coming on her show next Tuesday to get really in depth on 2020, on the 2020 elections, as I mentioned to you. As we get past Labor Day, you'll start to see the field shrinking on the Democratic side of the primary, and then we'll start to really see the issues take shape and really who the true front runners are. So with that, we'll take a quick break on WLVS. Welcome back to WLVS. Clearly, I am not Alina Seven, but this is The Hustle. I'm sitting in for her tonight. She is getting her kids back to college, and so she is, this is that time of year when folks are going back to school, and she is no different. She's been a good mom this week. She's a good mom every week. You know, as we get rolling through the 2020 election and you start to figure out who you're going to support or how you're going to support or what issues you care about, whatever happens and whatever who you choose to support, supposing if you're a Democrat, you're going to support people a little more on the left. 2016 was obviously a very contentious primary between Secretary Clinton and Senator Bernie Sanders. And it was a tight race. Obviously, clearly a lot of support on both sides. But a lot of the Bernie Sanders folks felt slighted that Secretary Clinton won the nomination, whether they thought she cheated or folks didn't treat Senator Sanders right, whatever the excuse, and could be legitimate. But what happened in November was the inexcusable part. Because in November, a lot of the Bernie Sanders people said, I don't like Hillary. I'm still mad at what happened. So you know what? I'm staying at home. Well, when you stayed at home, I know you thought you were making a point, but when you stayed at home, you basically voted for him. Yeah, number 45, the one that's in there now. So whatever point you thought you made, he wanted you to stay home. That was part of his strategy. You know, there are a lot of different types of suppression of votes. There's everything from you get to the polling place and the clerk tells you, sorry, you're not on the list. That's one way of suppression. And you go, leave, and go home. The other way of suppression, you vote, somehow your ballot got lost. The other way to suppression is to scare you from the polls. If you notice in some of color communities around the country, they'll put more law enforcement around different polling places, which makes folks not want to come. They'll pull out false information. Oh, you know what? The election's been moved to next Tuesday. Don't worry about voting this Tuesday. Or if you come to vote, they're going to get you for your parking tickets or other tickets or any bench warrants. All of those are fear tactics that are not true. Those are all suppression, way how they suppress votes. And the other way is how 45 ran his campaign. It was to make you think, dang, my guy Bernie was slighted. How often did he continue to talk about Secretary Clinton even after the election? So because of that, there was a lot of sour grapes. So one way to do is to try to prevent that from happening in November of 2020. So that means, let's say you're supporting, I don't even want to say a name because it's not fair. So let's say you're supporting one of the folks running right now, and your person does not get the nomination next year, and it gets the nomination to run against 45. You can't be angry enough where you want to take your ball and go home and say, you know what? I don't feel like voting. Because all you're doing is voting for him, presumably, again. So, you know, my father was chairman of the Democratic Party and used to say that Democrats fall in love with candidates. Republicans want to win. And they don't care if they like you. And I'll give you a prime example. 2016 race. Very similar. Republicans had, 17, 18 people running. Obviously 45 won. And remember, this dude talked about folks' wives, other candidates. And when I say talk about other wives, how they looked. Other candidates, talking about how stupid they were and dumb and slow and no energy. Just talked about them like dogs. But you know what? When it came general election, all of them endorsed 45. All of them came out strong. And I'm not saying Senator Sanders did not do that. But your supporters see if you're sincere or not. You know, he said he supported Secretary Clinton because he knew he had to. But the question was, did he really put the effort and really tell his soldiers to go out there and work hard in Wisconsin, in Michigan, in Pennsylvania, in Ohio? That's the question. In Florida. Now, if Senator Sanders did that, then, you know, great. But there's some question whether he did that or not. Secretary Clinton won the popular vote by more than 3 million votes, but she lost the Electoral College by only 77,000. And in our system of government, it's the Electoral College that elects a president. So this was significant. It was close. And if you keep it close, as another great politician once said, if an election is close, they'll steal it. So what you need to do is make sure it's not close. So if your candidate, for whatever reason, doesn't win, as much as you may have to hold your nose in November of 2020 and vote for the person to get this clown out, you got to do it. You got to do it. You know, I understand you want to make a point, but don't you want to win? Maybe that nominee won't have every one of the issues you care about the most. Maybe he or she won't be all the way there. But wouldn't you rather have somebody that's close rather than this guy? Now, if you like this guy because you like this guy, there's nothing I can say that'll make you change your mind, or anybody else. He has rock solid, as he call it, base support. But most presidents have their base. Richard Nixon had his base. Bill Clinton had his base. Folks have, Ronald Reagan had his base. Barack Obama had a base. So everybody has a base. I don't know why his base is so important and so different than everybody else's. So keep that in mind as you're coming down the stretch. Fight hard for your candidate. Want your candidate to win. May even get involved. Knock on doors if you want to. Make phone calls. Talk about them at the water fountain at work. Talk about them on Metro when you're traveling to and from. Talk to your kids about it. Fight hard. But when that fight is over, get behind the nominee. Because you'll have a better chance of getting the things you care about, whether it's health care for all, whether it's better gun laws, better safety laws, better education, better urban communities, whatever you care about. It's going to be better than this administration. So, as you're thinking, and I know politics is hard, some people think it's boring, it doesn't really matter, it has no impact on my life. Well, that's simply not true. Because now, especially on local level issues, politics and elections have an absolute and direct impact on your life. How your trash is picked up, potholes in the street, education for your schools, whether we've decriminalized marijuana. Those are real solid issues that actually impact you and your community every day. So it's not just the big national races that you hear a lot about when you're watching CNN or MSNBC or the Roland Martin show. But it's also those local level issues that you may not hear as much about. You know, the local guys and women, they knock on your door. They want to talk to you. They go to your church. You'll see them in the grocery store. You'll see them getting a cheeseburger or breakfast with their kids in the morning. You'll see them at the Metro. And you can talk to them and say, hey, how are you going to change my life? You going to make my schools better in my neighborhood? Will Ballou have the exact same resources as Wilson? So when you look at certainly a city like the District of Columbia, there's always been that charge that schools on the eastern side of the city don't get treated like schools on the west side of the city. So depending on who the politicians are, they can make a difference. They can level the playing field. So just always keep that in mind, that your vote does matter. And even if you don't buy what I'm saying, just go back to depending on how old you are, your parents, your great-grandparents, your grandparents, your aunts, your uncles, some of the people you care about, some of your heroes, some of your role models that fought and bled for you to have the right to vote. So on GP alone, you should be exercising your right to vote. And again, I get it. A lot of politicians, and me included, we weren't perfect. But you have to be involved. You have to cast your vote. You have to show that you care. Because that's the other part of voting. Don't think that politicians know where the votes are. What we do is, before you run, there's something called a walk sheet. Not proprietary. Walk sheet is basically what doors you're going to knock on in certain communities in the particular city or jurisdiction. But next to that sheet is also shows the kind of percentage of what those neighborhoods and how much they voted. So if you're at the top of the list of high voter turnout at a particular precinct, you better believe the politician or the candidate is going to knock on those doors and be at those churches and be in those grocery stores because they know you vote. Then they look at other parts of the city where the voter turnout is a little lower, or in some cases a lot lower. They say, maybe I'm not going to spend as much time over there. I care about folks. I want their votes, but I got to figure out my time and resources and what makes sense and where it makes sense for me to campaign. So it's important that you vote. Then the resources game starts. So that person wins. And then they're trying to figure out, who helped me get elected? That's why 45 is working so hard for his base. And whether they like to make sure they're able to keep their guns, or they're able to be white supremacists, or whatever they like tax cuts for the rich. That's why I like that guy. And so you got to always keep everyone's agenda in mind. And that's why elections and voting are so important. And so it still ties back to what Alina Seven wanted me to talk about today, and that's guns. And it is such a serious issue. And I said it at the top of the show, and I'll say it again. If a classroom full of children can get massacred and nothing changes, you got to wonder if it'll ever change. And that could be just me being a skeptic. But what evidence can you give me that when a classroom full of children does get mowed down, that there are changes? Now, there were changes in New Zealand. There were changes in certain states. Connecticut certainly did something after Sandy Hook. But I'm talking federally. I'm talking something that touches everyone in our country. And until you have a certain Congress, a certain leader of our government, which is the president, we're going to continue to have these laws that make it easy for folks to buy legally. No one's suggesting that some of these white supremacists didn't buy their guns legally. The question is, should they have been able to get them in the first place? So we're going to take another break on WLVS, give you something to think about before we come back. And as we go into break, keep in mind, and you'll hear me touch on this quite a bit, don't just do it and be involved because you think it's important or your family, which it is. But remember your ancestors that literally, you've seen the footage of the dogs jumping on people, fire hoses. You know what they were doing? They were fighting for you, giving you the opportunity to vote, giving you the opportunity to sit at a lunch counter and not get kicked out or spit on. So when it's time to level the playing field and you want to stay at home, you can't blame anybody but yourself, because all you're doing is voting for the guy you don't like. You gave him a vote. So just keep that in mind on WLVS, The Hustle. Well, there was nothing wrong with that music. That was nice. But as an old school DC cat, Mass Extinction and Rare Essence were my crew. And for those who are in my age group, of course I'm not going to say my age, but in my age group, there was a place called the Maverick Room back in the day. Every Thursday night, you had Essence, Trouble, Mass Extinction. And so those were the good old times. And then, of course, weapons got involved. Back in the day, we used to just meet in the McDonald's parking lot if you had a beef with somebody. And as the world started to change and weapons started to come to parties, clearly that changed, and the Maverick Room closed. A lot of different places closed where it was safe to go listen to go-go. And so we need to obviously get back to some of that old school magic around go-go music. We all miss the godfather of soul. And Chuck Brown is clearly somebody, no matter who you liked, whether you like Essence, EU, whoever you liked, everybody liked Chuck. And that's just the way it was when we grew up here in D.C. One of the things and welcome back to WLVS, The Hustle. One of the things that also 45 is going to run on is what he would claim is a strong economy. Now, that economy he inherited from Barack Obama. Barack Obama took us out. Let's just go back to 2008. 2008, we were in a recession. In that recession, George Bush totally jacked up the economy, ran the deficits up, and Barack Obama won in 2008, was sworn in 2009. Immediately came in and saved the auto industry. And did other things that helped raise the economy back up, giving people confidence. Let people go spend again. Let banks lend again. Because it was the housing crisis that caused the whole recession in the first place. So whatever economy 45 is sitting on, it's because of Barack Obama, the person he absolutely doesn't like, clearly jealous of. And because of all that, he wants to knock down everything Barack Obama did over the last 8 years, except the economy. But now you're starting to see the economy is starting to have some issues. It's starting to sputter a little bit. It's starting to sputter because what they called a sugar high was the tax cut for the rich. When it was frankly supposed to be, or they marketed it as a tax cut for the middle class, but it never was. They just hoped that some of those dollars to the rich and to corporations would trickle down. But we had trickle down before. Just check your history books. Ronald Reagan tried trickle down economics. Oh, if you give enough money to the top 1% richest folks in America and to companies, that money will trickle down to the middle class, to the least fortunate, to the least, the last, and the lost, as Marion Barry used to say. But that didn't work. And it didn't work this time. It never works. Economics 101 will tell you that doesn't work. You have to actually give the middle class a tax cut. You have to actually do it. You can't hope that it trickles down. But nonetheless, that sugar high is pretty much over. Deficits have gone through the roof. This president has spent more, or let this Congress spend more, frankly, than any president in history in a non-war economy. So now that it's starting to sputter a little bit, you're starting to see the administration try to start talking about, well, maybe we need to do a payroll tax cut. Now, that would be nice. Who wouldn't want that? Obama did that. But you only do it if you're trying to help boost the economy. So it's almost like you'll hear him 45, I don't say his name. You'll hear 45 say, oh, the economy's the best in the world. It's been the greatest expansion in history. Both not true. And then he'll say, oh, but you know what? We're starting to think about a payroll tax cut. Well, if the economy's doing great, why do you need to do a payroll tax cut? Because you need to give another sugar high into the economy to boost it going into an election year. Because next year, he can't have a recession. He has a recession, or if economic experts say we're about to go into a recession during an election year, that clearly is not good. So he's going to do everything he can to prevent. He doesn't care if the economy falls off a cliff in mid-November of 2020, as long as he's won re-election. So that's where you getting involved and staying involved is absolutely important. Of course, we all want a good economy, and no one's rooting for the economy to be terrible. That doesn't help any of us. I'm just asking you to do your own analysis. And if the economy does start to sputter or continue to sputter, and we do start looking at going into a recession, there's only one person to blame, 45. Barack Obama on a silver platter said, look, I can't give you a better situation than this. I saved the housing market. This is Barack Obama talking. I saved the automotive industry. I gave folks confidence again. And when you do that, it helps the economy. Now, the economy can also run in cycles. Some people will tell you, oh, politicians really don't have much to do with the economy. Maybe true, maybe not. But they get the credit and or the blame, whether it's deserved or not. So the economy he inherited, he 45, from Barack Obama, is something he frankly should have, I'm not suggesting he was going to give him any DAP for it or give him any credit for it, but to continue to lambaste Barack Obama because you don't like him or you're jealous, it's just childish. Everything 45 does is kind of childish. But what you want to look for in your candidate is somebody that's going to give everyone a chance to succeed in a good economy. Of course, jobs. Of course, that's everyone wants. Of course, jobs is number one. Everybody wants a job. Healthcare, clearly, everybody wants healthcare that they can trust and rely on for themselves and their families. You want to ride down the street without your tire blowing out because of big old potholes. Basic stuff. You want the trash picked up in your neighborhood. So you want your seniors to be cared and looked after. So that's the kind of country you want. No one's suggesting open borders and let just anybody come in whenever they feel like it. There's a process. Go through the process. But what 45 is saying is if you're coming from Europe, process is much easier and different. If you're coming from a Caribbean country, Central American country, if you're brown, then all of a sudden the process is different. Your kids get slapped away and snatched away from their parents. They get put in cages. Now, is that the kind of government and country you want? No, if it is, vote for the incumbent. Vote for 45. He's doing exactly what you like. Watching brown babies get ripped away from their parents, letting white supremacists become terrorists and grow, jacking up the economy that Barack Obama gave him. Now, if that's what you want, then look, I can't tell you not to vote for the guy. But if you want a different kind of America, again, where everyone gets a chance to succeed, then you got several options. You got 22 options, as a matter of fact. And during this primary, you'll go through and you'll figure out who you want to support. But the number one issue in polls amongst Democrats, of course, healthcare and jobs and the economy, crime, guns, a woman's right to choose. All those are important, serious issues that people should tackle. Criminal justice reform, serious issue, needs to be tackled, needs to be addressed. The environment, climate change, clearly other issues that need to be addressed and taken seriously. But the number one issue that most Democrats care about leading into this election is who can beat 45. Because if you beat 45, you have a better chance of getting what you want after that litany of the list I just gave of issues that Democrats care about. Now, what the GOP cares about, because it's not fair just to give what Democrats care about, at least according to polling. GOP cared about Second Amendment, guns, pro-life, building a wall. And everybody wants a good economy. I don't think there's any question about that. But one of the reasons a lot of Republicans don't like Obamacare, the ACA, is because a brother created it. And so because of that, they've always done whatever they can to knock it down because they don't want his legacy being part of fixing health care in America, which is one of the toughest things to fix. All you got to do is go back through the last 7 presidents. Everybody's tried to do it, tried to fix it. And Barack Obama did it. And should get credit for it. But it's interesting how this president and his administration is doing whatever, even if it helps his base, even if his base needs Obamacare to survive with pre-existing conditions, with making sure they have access to health care. Even if it helps his base, he's willing to tear it apart because Barack Obama did it. And if Senator John McCain, may rest in peace, didn't vote down that measure, there'd be no more ACA, no more Obamacare. So now what 45 and his administration is doing, he's taking it to court, trying to knock down the legislation in courts. Now, we don't know if he's going to be successful or not. But again, cutting off his nose to spite his face, even if his base likes Obamacare, they won't admit it to those rallies. You always hear those rallies. Even if they won't admit it, when they get home and they have to go to the doctor the next day, they're thanking God for the ACA because it took care of their pre-existing condition. So, again, everything comes back to what we're going to rally into over the next, 18 months or so. A nasty, ugly campaign designed to do 2 things. Smear whoever the Democratic nominee is because you know 45 is going to play dirty. But his other goal, which is a little more in the cut kind of goal, which is to make you not want to vote, to keep you at home, make you so frustrated in the process, I don't need to vote. It's not that important. I know you get sick of me talking about it, whether it's on The Hustle, whether it's on when I'm on Hannity on Fox, whether I'm on, the Riley show was canceled, when I'm on Roland Martin's show. I will say it until I continue to be blue in the face. As we get closer, and if your candidate does not win, you cannot take your ball and go home. I mean, let's just look back. Wouldn't you rather have Secretary Clinton? I'm not suggesting she's perfect. Maybe you don't like her. But wouldn't you rather have her than this clown? I mean, that's a decision you had to make. Now, you wanted to stay at home, you voted for him. So whether it's the economy, healthcare, and a multitude of other issues, it's not just the federal elections, it's also the local. Now, D.C. Has elections coming up also in 2020. Depending on where you live, will determine what ward is voting. The at-large members are up. At-large of the citywide. Certain ward are going to be up. The mayor's race isn't until 2022. So there are a lot of opportunities for you to be involved. Your ANC commissioners are going to be on the ballot. School board members will be on the ballot. So you have a lot of different options, and you'll hear me talking about it again here on The Hustle. And I look forward to talking to you as much as we can and trying to give you as much insight as we can from an extremely stormy Washington, D.C. I want to thank Alina Seven for having me host for her this evening. And I look forward to being back on WLVS. Michael Brown.